You clicked on this video for one reason and one reason in particular. To hear how strong is the beast. How strong is Mewtwo? What is his strength? Is this Pokemon we've known for generations from the very first game still the strongest Pokemon alive, as they said in the first movie and made very clear? But now there's tons of new Pokemon. So how do we really know whether he is the strongest alive still? That's what I'm here to put to a test in this theory. So to kick it off at first, people like to bring up the argument of Darkrai, the Pokemon of ultimate evil, darkness, a chaotic legend, but because of this they use types as in Psychic versus Dark type, and Dark type would destroy Psychic type. But if this were truly true, there were Dark-type Pokemon back in the generations when Mewtwo was still the strongest, and no one ever said that my wonderful little Duskull could take on the Mewtwo and win. And then let's go even further and explore, using the games real quick, not anything particular in the games, but the moveset. Now, I'm talking about Mewtwo from the show. He is stronger than any kind of Pokemon. But now, let's get back to that moves. Movesets in Pokemon show what all moves can be known in the Pokemon world. That's all the games I'm using there for. In the games, you can lose up to your Pokemon can learn up to 4 moves, including Mewtwo. But this isn't the games. As far as I've seen the show, a Pokemon can learn as many moves as they want. And considering I'm not sure how it works, but I would imagine that they have to be taught moves anyway if they're caught by a trainer. Mewtwo is not caught by a trainer. He is simply a free will type Pokemon. So, in other words, it would be very easily for Mewtwo to know a kind of move that wouldn't be a Psychic type to harm a Dark type Pokemon. And yes, this would mean depending on the strength of Mewtwo and knowing from the show how strong he truly is, Mewtwo could easily defeat the wonderful Pokemon Darkrai, showing that he is truly the stronger kind. Because if this were true that Darkrai was stronger, it would be so easy for the fact that he's just a Dark type, many other type Pokemon would easily be able to defeat Mewtwo, but this just isn't the case. Because Mewtwo has beaten all kinds of Pokemon before. When Giovanni first captured him and put him in a machine, he tried to fight others. So yes, Mewtwo is stronger than Darkrai. So second up in the ringer versus our Mewtwo is our wonderful Arceus, the god of Pokemon. The one Pokemon who supposedly created every Pokemon alive. Actually, that's not true. He miscalculated creating one specific Pokemon, and that Pokemon, you may ask, is Mewtwo. Mewtwo was not created by Arceus. He was actually cloned by humans on the Pokemon planet. He was never created by Arceus, and Arceus had nothing to do with the existence of Mewtwo himself. This would mean that Arceus has an actual Pokemon that he had nothing to do with creation, and with this as a factor, can easily mean that Mewtwo can go beyond the strengths instead of Arceus simply creating Mewtwo to be weaker when this isn't the case. So yes, you could say in a form, Mewtwo could simply also be a god of Pokemon, considering no one created him except for the humans. But was it really a human? Mew, the DNA, the brother to Mewtwo, wonderful, crazy little cute, can learn any move, but yet Mewtwo can still beat Mew. It has been shown that really his power even succeeds Mew's by far in plenty of other games. Now, once again, even in the show, I believe that Mewtwo is about to defeat Mew. And not to mention, let's go into the show's cloning balls. Do you know what those things do? They capture any Pokemon in existence legendary. It don't matter what it is. It's gonna get captured and cloned. So imagine this. Arceus, out of the blue, gets caught in one of these clone balls, and Mewtwo clones Arceus to fight Arceus. And then Arceus would be controlled by Mewtwo because it would see Mewtwo as his trainer, as his owner. And with this in the implication, that would mean that Mewtwo can, in a sense, be a god to Pokemon. But let's think about this a little bit more further. In the show, you will notice that simply in the very first movie, all Mewtwo has to do to literally control the weather is stir 3 of his fingers. Now, I don't know, but I don't think that a normal Pokemon can simply control the weather by throwing 3 of his fingers around. Do you think it's possible that Mewtwo really is a god? Is he really a god of Pokemon? But he just holds back and doesn't show it. Could this be the possible analogy? Because Pokemon shouldn't be able to control the weather by moving 3 of their fingers. Could you imagine if he actually tried with more of his might to control the weather? He would be considered a god of Pokemon. That's what he would be. And he sort of already is. But here's the factor. Yes, Mewtwo in the end probably would defeat Arceus. Now, you may be thinking, but Arceus can tear open different dimensions. That's nothing to Mewtwo. Mewtwo is a little too smart. Now, smartness in Pokemon. Let's get to this thing. Before we break down the rest of Arceus vs. Mewtwo, I need to implement the wonderfulness of smart Pokemon. How does this work? Well, simply, we're going to use the cuddly little Meowth from Team Rocket to analyze what smartness is in Pokemon. What really is smart? Well, I can tell you right now that if a Pokemon can talk, they're smarter than the others. Because if Pokemon can talk, all Pokemon in the show that generally talk act like the humans, act like the trainers, just like how Meowth acts like a normal human in the Team Rocket crew. But any Pokemon that says their name over and over acts like a Pokemon, listening to the trainer, when someone like Meowth seems to have a free will of his own, which would mean Pokemon that aren't smart enough to talk seem to just not have a free will, really, just do what they're told. So simply, that put into play, a Pokemon is determined by smartness whether they can talk or not in the show, which means if they can talk, they're at least the smartness of the level of a human being or a trainer, as you would call it, in a show. So yes, if a Pokemon can speak, they are smart as a human. But now how does Meowth talk exactly? With his mouth. So, not with his mind, of course. But who can talk with their mind? Well, Mewtwo, of course. And to talk with your mind, I would imagine that would take quite the amount of smarts. That would mean that you're even smarter than a cat and a Meowth or a Pokemon. But if Pokemon that can talk with their mouth are the same level as a human and smarts, then that would mean that Mewtwo would be even smarter than a human being on the planet of Pokemon. So, but let's not forget the wonderful Arceus. Arceus can talk too. So Arceus has the ability to speak. But why does Arceus like to do these things? But as far as I've seen in my research on Arceus, he simply attacks just like every other normal Pokemon. He doesn't have godlike power when it comes to attacking or changing the universe. He may have created every other Pokemon, but I feel like that's the only thing that he has had come close to as a power to be called God of Pokemon. His powers are certainly nothing compared to a god, or some just simple Pokemon attacks, completely taught by a trainer, of course. Mewtwo has time and time again stopped Pokeballs and done all these other things, so with this in account, Mewtwo would simply destroy Arceus because he would be smarter, quicker, and more intelligent to avoid his attacks. Considering Mewtwo has fought every other kind of Pokemon, I don't think Arceus' attacks would be a certain surprise to this wonderful little powerful Mewtwo psychic Pokemon. So with that in play, he can beat Arceus. But yes, I just proved that he can beat about any Pokemon still in existence, with my theory, of course. So with this in play, well, if he's the strongest, then why don't they show it more? Why don't they put it out on the bars more? Well, simple reason, people. Mewtwo doesn't like his strength. He doesn't like that he's stronger. He feels out of place in the world of Pokemon. He says it time and time again. So in fact, he may be stronger than the legendaries or anything else on the planet, but he would never use that strength to his advantage to attack other types of Pokemon because he doesn't see the rightness in it. He doesn't find himself as a Pokemon. He doesn't define himself as a human, as a Pokemon. He defines himself as something in the world that's out of place. And with this in mind, he would never attack anything because he feels like he doesn't belong in this world. He doesn't belong in the Pokemon world. That's why you never really see him attack anything. But Mew had to start some crap with him, and that's the only reason he really fought him. But besides this, Mewtwo isn't a threat to anybody. He's just a Pokemon that's lonely and sad because he feels out of place in the world. But he found his calling when Genesect came around and decided to mess with the planet. Genesects were also out of place in the Pokemon universe. And what did Mewtwo exactly do? he attacked the Genesect. And if you're wondering why, because simply put, Mewtwo is the guardian of the world when it comes to misplaced Pokemon. Pokemon that do not belong will be attacked by Mewtwo because he's the guardian of their planet. So yes, he may be the strongest Pokemon ever, but let's not forget that he finds himself out of place. And as long as this remains intact, Mewtwo will never attack Arceus or Darkrai. He simply wouldn't care. He would help them defeat things. He would help them destroy anything that's out of place. That's why you see in the movies Mewtwo not show up, because Arceus is meant to be there. Darkrai is meant to be there. They're Pokemon that are meant to exist on the planet Earth. Mewtwo, however, does not belong. Genesect do not belong. That's why Mewtwo attacks anything that doesn't belong in the planet Earth. If you're a Pokemon that is not meant to exist, then your enemy is Mewtwo. Mewtwo is the savior, the protector of the Pokemon Earth when it comes to unput Pokemon that aren't meant to be on the world of Pokemon, aren't meant to exist just like him. And that's Mewtwo's purpose. So he really is the strongest. But if you still think about that Arceus thing and still think I'm wrong, did you forget that Mewtwo has mind erasing abilities? He could simply in a battle make his enemy completely keep forgetting his attacks. Completely keep forgetting. And we can't even say how far back he can make them forget. He can make Arceus forget that he's completely has ever created any Pokemon, and simply win the battle just by making the Pokemon erase their mind over and over again. But as I said before, he would have no reason to attack any other Pokemon because they're meant to be there. But if you're a Pokemon that isn't meant to be on the planet of Pokemon, then you're Mewtwo's enemy. And that about does it for this Pokemon theory. So thanks for watching, guys. And if you want more Pokemon theories, let me know in the comments below. Like this video, share this video, do whatever you want with it, subscribe, and that about does it. And I will do some more Pokemon theories in the future, hopefully. Bye.